Could Arsenal sign Amadou Onana and Xavi Simons for a combined £50 million? Sounds tempting. Could it really happen? Let's go through the reports. Joe Thomas was one of the first to come out with it, saying that Arsenal have inquired about the availability of Everton midfielder Amadou Onana. As you can see, he's an Everton correspondent for the Liverpool Echo, and he wasn't the only one to come out with this news, because BBC Sport was straight in there as well on the night that the Euros kicked off, saying that Arsenal made contact with Everton over the availability of midfielder Amadou Onana. So, two separate sources, both saying Arsenal are interested, or at least have inquired, in Amadou Onana. There was another report from Fabrizio Romano over the weekend saying that Arsenal have been tracking Onana and that he's one of the players on the list and has been for a few previous windows, but before then Arsenal hadn't really entered in conversations. He goes on to say that we are monitoring Onana, but there's nothing concrete in terms of direct contact. Everton are expecting clubs to move for the Belgian midfielder. So I've summed up some of the news and reports there on the Onana front in terms of his links to Arsenal. Let's digest this all then and sort of try to come to a conclusion as to what's really going on. I don't know anything myself. I'm no in the know, ITK, but I can sort of get a good idea for what I think's happening. Essentially, I think Arsenal like Onana. We knew this 2 years ago when we tried to sign him before he moved to Everton. He's clearly a talented player that, you know, Arteta and Edu like the look of. He was brilliant against us at the Emirates on the final day of the season, and I could see how he's a player that would fit the way we play. I could see how he'd fit in. I could see why Arsenal would be interested, especially if there's an opportunity to take advantage of Everton's PSR situation, which we've talked about on this channel before. Go check out that video if you want to watch and understand really what's going on with Everton and why they're under pressure to sell. But because of that, I can imagine Arsenal thinking there might be a market opportunity here. A bit like we've heard all the reports recently that Sesko was a market opportunity, that they weren't maybe desperate to get the deal done this summer, but they thought it was a good deal to do and it made sense to do. Does Onana present another one of those? Now, we've seen from this, it's made contact, inquired. That's what Arsenal are doing with regards to finding out if Onana is potentially available. What does that really mean? And to be honest, I don't really know. But I think, if I'm to have a good guess, it's that he's a player on a list of, 5 top targets that Arsenal are interested in, and they've purely asked Everton what the terms of a deal would be. They've just picked up the phone or sent an email, however it works, and just said, "Hello Everton, we want your player, how much would he cost? Are you willing to enter negotiations? How would you like to structure the deal? Does it have to be flat out 50 million? Would you do 30 plus add-ons?" They're probably just trying to understand how Everton would be willing to do business, because that impacts how Arsenal can do business with other players as well. And they're probably gathering information on a lot of players to then work out what the next steps are. I think that's what it means by have made contact, have inquired. They need to know if the player is interested, all of that. Now, in terms of a potential fee we might pay for Onana, 50 million I've seen floated around. I think that sounds about right. I wonder how the Jared Branthwaite deal to Man United could impact this, because as you can see from David Ornstein, Everton did reject a £35 million bid from Manchester United and deem that unacceptable. They're looking for around 75 million. Okay, so if Branthwaite's around 75 million, again, it's probably going to be sold because of the pressures of PSR. Where's Onana in that? Because there's two ways to look at it. You could say, well, Onana's probably then a 50 to 55 million pound player, because I think Branthwaite was always going to be the far more expensive of the two if they were going to sell. But at the same time, if they sell one of those players, so if Branthwaite does go for 75 million, then does that ease the financial pressures on Everton, in which case they can play more hardball with Onana, because they're like, look, the pressure to sell is gone now. We've sold a big asset. Now if you want Onana, it's going to be 85 million because he's more important to us. Interesting to see how that swings things. So worth keeping an eye on what happens with Jared Branthwaite and Man United if we genuinely are interested in Amadou Onana. But like I mentioned, he's not the only player we've been linked to this weekend. Xavi Simons as well. This from L'Equipe, which was aggregated by Bayern and Germany, have said that Bayern, Arsenal, Man United and City have all contacted PSG over the potential sale of Xavi Simons. So again, the word contacted, inquired, got in touch, just finding out what's going on. And in the middle of a European tournament at the moment, we've got the Euros. Onana and Simons are both with Belgium and the Netherlands, so nothing's going to get done too soon, you'd imagine. But like I said, PSR issues might force the issue with Onana. So what's really interesting about this report, they're basically saying that PSG would have to basically give a percentage of the sale to PSV if he's sold before January 2025. So they're looking at potentially a loan deal to be done, and that would suit Arsenal massively. That's where the whole element of 50 million or so for Onana plus Simons on loan, and you've addressed what? Number 6, number 8, number 10, right wing and left wing in a combined 50 million with two of Europe's most exciting young or younger players. I mean, that sounds incredibly tempting. And I think Arsenal will definitely be looking at this and thinking, well, if we, and let's make up, have a budget of 150 to 200 million, that's roughly what Arsenal and most big clubs in the Premier League have been spending the last few years, then you're probably thinking that actually if you do those deals, there's a lot of money there for a marquee striker. There's a lot of money there to get that real forward you want, that real 8 or whatever it is, whatever big player, whether it's a Guimaraes who at first was too expensive or Isak or whatever. That feels more doable if you're beefing up the squad with 2 really talented youngsters and being quite shrewd in the market about it. So I'm interested to see whether Arsenal will be tempted to go down that route. It doesn't feel very Arsenal. It doesn't feel like 2 deals Arsenal would do. I mean, maybe Simons would be. You look at the fact we've got Ødegaard on loan. Look how that worked. So maybe there's something there. We do buy from within the Premier League. So I guess I totally see it happening, but I have my doubts. My honest opinion on all this is, well, it's easy to get excited about making contact and all that. I think the reality is that Arsenal are just trying to understand all the different situations for all their targets so they can then know what the next steps are. But Xavi Simons is a very talented player. As you can see, he was on loan at Leipzig, getting 8 goals and 13 assists in the Bundesliga, 10 and 15 in all competitions. He played predominantly out on the left, but he played out on the right as well. A couple of times as attacking midfielder. But as you can see, the season before for PSV, that's when he did get a lot more games in the central areas of the pitch and actually got a lot of goals and a couple of assists in there as well. So that's not bad, in terms of output for the last 2 seasons. We know he was a Barcelona youngster as well. PSG bought him, clearly a very highly rated player. Is it a deal Arsenal could do? We'll keep an eye on it, but I urge patience, especially on the Simons one. I just don't think things will really get moving for the next few weeks. Do I believe these reports? Yeah, I believe Arsenal have absolutely tried to find out what's going on with these players so they can at least take the next steps, but I don't think that means that anything is advanced in any way, shape or form. What is interesting though is whenever David Ornstein speaks, and he's come in with this about Reiss Nelson, saying that he has told Arsenal he wants to assess options for a potential transfer. Apparently we rejected approaches in January. We would want around 200. Imagine we'd want 200 million. We want around 20 million, including add-ons, if we decide to sell. Palace, Fulham, Forest and West Ham, all interested in the 24-year-old. I like Reiss Nelson, and he's a good player. I think in the opportunities he's had for Arsenal, which are very few, I think he's shown talent. I think you can see that there's a player there that can certainly play regularly in the Premier League, but he's not played often enough to really get momentum. And often enough to know, for us to know whether he's really the wing depth and option that we need for Saka and Martinelli. Trossard stepped up. Nelson has struggled to. But like I said, he's not really had the opportunities either. So I just think it makes sense for all parties. If we get around 20 million for him, I'd be very happy. And I think he'd get a really, really good move to the Premier League. I weirdly think, even though he's not played that much for Arsenal, I think his stock has gone up since his loan 2 years ago and playing the last 2 seasons in the squad. I think actually people see him as more valuable than perhaps they did 2 years ago. So I think that's all worked out for Arsenal in terms of their management of the player, but in terms of his career, he's 24, he'll want to go play regularly somewhere now, and that makes complete sense. Let's see what happens with Reiss Nelson. I predict he will get a move this summer, and I predict we will get a pretty good transfer fee if we're looking for around 20 million. So let's see what happens there. In other news, we did see Bukayo Saka, Declan Rice, Jakub Kiwior and Jorginho play at the Euros. Only Kiwior on that list I mentioned didn't get the win that they wanted. Very nearly got a really good point having taken the lead against the Netherlands, but wasn't to be for Poland. Jorginho did well for Italy as they came from 1-0 down to beat Albania, and Saka and Rice were 2 of England's best players on the pitch, along with Jude Bellingham and Mark Guehi. Funnily enough, we've been linked with Mark Guehi before. Be interested to see if that's a deal Arsenal would explore again this summer, but those 4 doing really well, and Saka just showing what an incredible outlet he is down the right wing. I mean, when you really stop and think how many great right wingers are there in the world, I know Lamine Yamal, 16-year-old, has been unbelievable and looked that way for Spain the other day with a great assist for Carvajal. And, there's a few, but, Saka is up there, right? He is one of the best right wingers in the world. He proved it again on the European stage for England, and he's been proving it for Arsenal. So it's always great to see Arsenal players do well. Of course, Kai Havertz led the line for Germany as they got their win on Friday night, getting the assist, bagging his penalty. Things are going well for Arsenal players at the Euros so far. On the whole, let's see how everything else goes throughout the rest of the tournament. Now, going to end the video on some really, really sad news. Some really sad news from the weekend. Kevin Campbell, former Arsenal striker, scored 55 goals for the club, sadly passed away after a short illness. And the tributes poured in. Ian Wright, I believe, has done a podcast. There will be videos on AFTV as well, talking about the player, but the man as well. Because the one thing that's really come through in all the tributes is not only what he did for Arsenal on the pitch, but off the pitch. What a guy he was, the way he embraced the fans, and the way he was loved by everyone around him. Now, I was too young to experience Kevin Campbell the, footballer for Arsenal who scored all those goals. But what I did see in my time doing social media and content and all that is that this was a former Arsenal player who embraced the fan base like none other. He was there doing videos with all sorts of Arsenal content creators, who was always available to give his time, to support what the fans had to say, to support the work of the fans, and he just represented Arsenal and the Arsenal family with so much class. I'm genuinely gutted by the news. I know a lot of people who knew him really well and only had the most nicest things to say about him. Football and Arsenal lost a good one, and my thoughts and prayers are with his family in a really difficult time. Thank you for everything, Super Kevin Campbell. We as a fan base and the footballing world are eternally grateful.